In this video, I'm going to share with you how I turned around a failing consulting business and helped it to grow to over 7 figures per year. So we had 2 guys who had been running a consulting business for several years together. They had gotten up to about $600,000 per year in top line revenue. Their partnership was becoming a little bit unstable, mainly because the business wasn't progressing, it wasn't growing, it didn't have the same level of momentum or energy as it had in the past when things were going well, right? They weren't seeing the same level of leads, they weren't closing deals successfully, the marketing activities they were trying didn't seem to be working very well. And so they reached out, joined our Clarity Coaching program to get help to turn things around. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to take you through the steps that I took them through so that you can see and hopefully look at your own business and figure out how you might be able to apply some of these practices and principles and ideas to increase the effectiveness and success and growth of your own consulting business. So the first thing that we did to turn this business around and help them to get actually over 7 figures now per year in their consulting business was started by doing a client analysis. This is where we really looked at what was the value per client, as well as where was the majority of their business coming from. This is all about looking at, the number of clients that you have, figuring out which clients represent what percentage of your overall revenue and profits, and trying to identify what are the characteristics of your best clients. So it's an inventory of all the different clients that you've worked with over given period of time. In their case, we looked at the last 2 years, right? So 24 months of data, and we had them to categorize, right? Who the client was, what are the characteristics of that client? Are they a large organization, a small organization? How many employees do they have? Where are they located? Where are their offices? Anything that would help to kind of identify who that client is and what they kind of look like. The second thing that we then did was we had them look at the profitability of each client. You might have a $50,000 project, but you may find that you are maybe only making $10,000 on that project, whereas you might have another project that is $30,000, but you're keeping $25,000 of it, right? So some people might lean towards the $50,000 project initially because it sounds like a bigger project than $30,000, but the profitability of the second project, right, is significantly higher, not only in percentage, but also in actual dollar value. So we had them look through all of the clients and the revenue, and then what was the profit that came from each of those clients. The next thing that we had them do as it relates to profitability is to actually go through the different types of engagements and projects that they provided and look at what is the profitability of each of those projects, right? So you might provide, let's say, 3 different types of services or engagements or levels of engagement. And it's important to understand, well, what is the profitability of each of those projects, each of those engagements? And this will depend, or I should say there'll be different factors depending on whether it's just you as a solo consultant or whether you are the founder of a boutique firm and you have a team, you have maybe contractors, part-time, full-time. But what you want to arrive at is a clear understanding of how profitable is each of our clients, as well as how profitable are the different types of projects that we have. So that was the second step. Then the third step that they went through was to actually do some analysis. And we did this together and going through. So once they had collected this data, they had done the inventory, they had kind of worked through it. And this is something that I guided them through as well. And we as a team here help them through. What we then do is we wanted to see, well, what is the data telling us, right? There's always a story inside of the data. There's going to be something inside of the data that starts to kind of help you to see what the core issue is, and then gives us a real clue as to where to make adjustments, where to turn the dial a little bit higher up, what to potentially adjust, cut, remove, where to lean more into. And so in their specific situation, what we actually found was the vast majority of the revenue of the business was coming from larger companies. So in that initial inventory that I talked about, right, that kind of client analysis, they had in broad strokes 2 groups of clients. They had larger organizations and they had smaller organizations. What they found through looking at the data is that the larger organizations, the ones that are more established, the vast majority of the revenue came from those larger organizations, even though the vast majority in terms of numbers, the volume of clients that they had over that 2-year period was of smaller companies. So just to give an example, you might have 20 clients over 2 years that represent 80% of your revenue. But that means that you have 80% of your clients, right? In this case, the smaller clients for them only represented 20% of their revenue. Now, I'm giving you broad strokes in terms of the percentages. Their numbers were certainly different. It wasn't a clear and clean 80-20, just like the Pareto principle. But that's what actually started to see, is that they had a lot of smaller clients that contributed a little in terms of revenue. And then even more important than revenue was profit. And so what we then started to see is that there was certain types of projects that they tended to deliver for only the larger clients, and a certain dollar value of those projects that made sense. We also established that there was almost a line that we could create, a cutoff or a starting point of where it makes sense for them to say yes to clients and where it makes sense to say no, meaning that they could be then very confident in essentially saying, we're not going to take on any projects unless they are at least $15,000 or whatever that number was exactly for them. And so that helped them immensely. But the other thing that really helped them, and this is what I'll get into in terms of the next step, the actions that we took, is that because they realized that they had a lot of smaller clients who contributed very little in terms of revenue and profits, it made absolutely no sense for them to continue focusing on those smaller clients, right? The amount of time that they needed to spend in chasing those clients, marketing to them, having conversations with them, moving them through the sales cycle, engaging in projects, communicating. There was a lot of work, a lot of administration, a lot of time spent on everything from the marketing to the sales to the fulfillment to the offboarding to the just overall client and project management that was not producing a lot of revenue and profit in the business. And so knowing that, now we get to the fourth part, which are the actions. So once we were clear on the analysis of what was going on, the big opportunities became very clear. And those opportunities were to establish that minimum project value. They knew that it didn't make sense for them to take on projects below a certain level. They had never seen that or thought about it in that way. And so that became a really good kind of yardstick for them to use, because in conversations, they could essentially filter for that or qualify/disqualify potential clients based on their ability to at least make that minimum level investment. If they couldn't do that, they weren't going to be an ideal client. But the other thing that we did, which was even more, I think, effective and powerful for them, was that knowing that their ideal clients were not all different types of companies. When you look at what they were doing prior to this, and I think the reason that they kind of got into the situation that they were in is that their marketing, their messaging was a mess. They weren't clear on who their ideal client was. They were treating smaller companies the same way that they were treating larger companies. Their messaging was the same for small and large. There was no differentiation and no distinction. Well, through this analysis, now it became very clear that they should not be focusing on smaller companies. So now the focus becomes more on the larger companies. We help them to update their message to speak directly to those larger companies because they had different issues, different challenges, different consequences, different considerations, different ways of viewing risk, different levels of value that could be created for them. And so knowing that, they were able to update their messaging. We were able to help them to put a marketing system in place to communicate more effectively in a campaign to get in front of those larger clients. And so when you start to compound those things, clarity on the ideal client, messaging that resonates with the ideal client, marketing to that ideal client, and starting to have more conversations with that ideal client, you can see that they had 80% of their revenue coming from 20% of their clients. And now what we've done is opened that up significantly. And so now what they're finding is they have a much larger portion of their overall revenue coming from these larger clients. And because those larger clients are able to invest at a higher level, the average project value has increased significantly. And because we also saw in the data and through this work that we did together was that those larger clients and larger projects were also more profitable for them, their profitability increased significantly. They're spending less time with smaller clients, less time with smaller revenue and smaller profit projects, and more time with those who are actually adding significant value and growth to their business. So fast forward to today, the two partners in the firm are really working together. The energy is back. The momentum is building. They're making significantly more progress. They're clear on who to communicate to, who to focus on, and their business is now well over 7 figures. So that's one example of what to look for and how to kind of dissect and break down a potential business or a business that is potentially plateauing or even declining, and the things that you can even look at, and I would encourage you to look at, to see what optimizations, course corrections, adjustments, refinements you can make to improve your business and help it to grow and scale to that next level. Of course, if you're interested in learning more about how to grow your consulting business, head over to consultingsuccess.com or click on the link below this video and look into our Clarity Coaching program. Set up a call. We'd love to have a conversation with you to explore how we can help you to grow your consulting business.